The whole classroom froze. A math professor, known for his arrogance, wrote a complicated equation on the board, but something was off. He smirked and said, "If you're as smart as you claim, solve this." Everyone thought the black student would fail. But what happened next left the entire room stunned. It was an ordinary morning in college when tension filled the air. Professor Whitman, a strict and prideful math professor, often treated his students with little respect. But he had a particular bias against Jamal, a brilliant black student who had consistently topped exams. One day, Whitman stood in front of the class, eyes fixed on Jamal, and scribbled an unusually complex equation on the board. "Solve this if you can," he said, with a sarcastic grin. The class looked on, whispering. Some believed it was impossible. Jamal stayed calm, picked up his notebook, and began to study the equation carefully. Something about it felt strange. Minutes passed, and Jamal's sharp eyes caught something no one else had noticed. The professor had intentionally written a wrong equation, one designed to trap him. Instead of a legitimate problem, it was unsolvable. "This doesn't make sense," one student muttered. The professor smirked wider, waiting for Jamal to give up. But Jamal leaned back in his chair and said, "Sir, this problem has no solution, not because I can't solve it, but because you wrote it incorrectly." The class gasped. Whitman's face tightened. For the first time, the professor was the one under pressure. Jamal stood, walked to the board, and circled the flawed part of the equation. "Right here," he explained. "You intentionally broke the rule of quadratic functions." Then, in front of everyone, he rewrote the correct form of the equation. His chalk moved fast and confident, and soon the board was filled with clear, logical steps. Within minutes, he reached the correct solution, one that actually worked. The room was silent, except for the sound of chalk hitting the tray. Students who once doubted him now stared in awe. Even those who whispered behind his back were forced to admit he was right. Professor Whitman's face turned pale. He had tried to humiliate Jamal, but instead, Jamal had exposed his trick and taught the entire class a lesson. For a moment, the professor stood frozen, unable to speak. The students broke into whispers, then applause. One girl whispered, "He's smarter than the professor." Another said, "That was genius." Whitman adjusted his glasses and muttered something under his breath, but his authority had been shaken. Jamal, calm and composed, returned to his seat without a smile or a boast. His actions had spoken louder than any words. The next day, word of Jamal's brilliance spread across campus. Students who barely knew him now admired him. Even teachers from other departments praised his intelligence. Professor Whitman, though humbled, never admitted his mistake openly, but his behavior toward Jamal changed forever. He no longer underestimated him, nor any other student in class. Jamal had done more than solve a math problem. He had stood up to injustice, proved his worth, and inspired his classmates to believe in themselves. That evening, Jamal walked home with his notebook in hand, quietly smiling. He knew this was more than just math. It was about dignity, equality, and respect, and he had won them all. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Subscribe to Human Fables for more powerful and inspiring stories every week.